The Concordance station always smelled faintly of ozone and recycled citrus, a scent engineered to calm visiting species with incompatible biochemistries. Leo Marsh suspected it existed mainly to calm junior diplomatic assistants like himself. The station's central ring rotated slowly beyond the transparent walls, revealing a stitched panorama of distant stars, cargo traffic, and the occasional ceremonial cruiser gliding past with unnecessary elegance. Leo tried not to stare. Staring, he had learned, was often interpreted as a threat, a mating signal, or a declaration of war, depending on who noticed. He adjusted the collar of his formal suit for the third time in as many minutes. The fabric was rated multi-species acceptable, which meant it neither reflected light offensively nor shed fibers toxic to insectoid lungs. It was also slightly too tight, a reminder that he had been promoted faster than his wardrobe budget. As an assistant, his job was simple. Follow his superior, carry the data slate, sit where indicated, and above all, not become memorable. The circular council chamber loomed ahead, its doors parting with a dignified hum. Inside, the space was vast and precisely symmetrical, designed to offend no one by favoring no single perspective. Seats were arranged in a perfect ring around a hollow center where holographic projections would soon bloom into star charts and treaty clauses. Each seat was subtly different, customized to its occupant's physiology. Leo's, according to his slate, was auxiliary position 17, which sounded reassuringly insignificant. He followed the illuminated path on the floor, counting under his breath. 14, 15, 16, 17. He sat. The seat adjusted itself politely, cushioning his weight and aligning his spine. Success, he thought, with quiet triumph. No tripping, no wrong appendage placement, no accidental insult. He allowed himself a small breath. Then he noticed the seat beside him. It was not a seat so much as a throne. Taller, broader, carved from a pale luminous alloy etched with symbols that shifted when viewed directly. It radiated absence, the way a missing tooth demands attention. Leo froze. His slate flickered, then went blank, as if refusing to be involved. A ripple passed through the chamber. Delegations arrived in procession, robes whispering, carapaces clicking, atmospheric fields shimmering around those who required them. Leo sat very still, hoping invisibility was contagious. The throne beside him remained empty. When Queen Sylvana entered, the room subtly reoriented itself. It was not an official protocol, just an instinctive adjustment, as if gravity itself preferred her. She looked almost human at first glance. Pale skin, long blonde hair falling straight down her back. But the illusion faltered at her ears, long and elegant, tapering to gentle points that marked her as something older and other. Her expression was composed, regal, and tired in a way Leo recognized from long nights and impossible expectations. She approached the throne. Leo's internal monologue began to scream helpful suggestions like run, apologize, and invent a sudden medical emergency. He pushed against the armrest to stand. Her hand closed around his. It was cool, firm, unmistakably real. Not painful, but unyielding. Leo looked up, eyes wide. She did not look at him. Her gaze remained forward, fixed on the watching council. "Don't get up," she said softly, her voice carried only to him by a discreet acoustic field. "Stay here." Leo swallowed. His mind raced through diplomatic manuals, none of which covered this scenario. He nodded because nodding seemed less dangerous than screaming. Around them, the council settled. The throne remained unoccupied, its meaning heavy in the air. Leo finally understood. The consort's seat, empty by design, sacred in its emptiness. The negotiations began. Voices layered over one another, translated into a neutral tone by implants Leo barely trusted. Threats wore smiles, promises hid knives. Leo sat beside the queen, acutely aware of his own breathing, of the way her grip tightened whenever a rival faction pressed too hard. His arm began to tingle. He considered this a small price to pay for galactic peace. At one point, his stomach betrayed him with a quiet growl. Sylvana's fingers twitched. "If you faint," she murmured, History will remember you very unkindly." He managed a smile he hoped conveyed competence rather than terror. "I'll try to stay conscious," he whispered back. Outside, the stars drifted on, indifferent. Inside, Leo Marsh sat perfectly still, holding the hand of a queen, wondering how a simple seating error had already become the most important moment of his life. Time inside the council chamber did not pass so much as stretch. Minutes elongated into careful eternities, measured not by clocks but by the tightening and loosening of Queen Sylvana's grip around Leo's hand. He became acutely aware of small things: the faint hum beneath the floor panels, the way the air temperature adjusted every time a new speaker rose, the precise angle at which his elbow would eventually cease to feel like part of his body. The first speaker was a tall delegate encased in a translucent pressure field, its voice translated into something pleasantly neutral, despite the original apparently involving 3 simultaneous vocal cords. Leo focused on nodding at appropriate intervals. He had no idea what was being said, but nodding felt diplomatically versatile. The queen did not nod. She listened, unmoving, her posture carved from stillness. Only her fingers betrayed her, tightening slightly when the speaker lingered too long on the phrase, strategic imbalance. Leo's internal panic attempted to resurface, but it found itself oddly constrained by the situation. It was difficult to spiral when one was physically anchored to a monarch. Instead, his thoughts wandered into absurd territory. He wondered whether the historical record would note his name correctly or reduce him to something like unknown human handholder. He wondered if his supervisor was somewhere in the chamber, watching this unfold and silently disowning him. A data hologram bloomed in the hollow center of the chamber, projecting star systems in soft, rotating light. Borders pulsed gently, shifting with each proposed amendment. The sight was mesmerizing. Leo leaned forward slightly, forgetting for a moment where he was. Queen Sylvana's hand tightened sharply. "Still," she murmured. "Right. Sorry," he whispered, returning to his statue impression. The second speaker was more aggressive. Their species favored directness, which in practice meant stating threats as if they were casual observations. As they spoke, Leo felt the queen's grip grow colder, more rigid. He glanced at her face from the corner of his eye. Up close, her composure was extraordinary, but he could see the effort behind it, the way her jaw set just a fraction tighter than necessary. His arm had now progressed from tingling to a numb, floating sensation. He debated briefly whether it would be rude to lose circulation during peace talks. He decided it probably would. "You're doing well," Sylvana said quietly without turning her head. The words startled him. "I am. You haven't screamed or attempted escape," she replied. "Both are common reactions." He bit back a laugh. It escaped anyway, a small, ill-timed sound. Several delegates glanced in their direction. Leo froze, eyes forward. Sylvana's thumb pressed lightly against his hand, a warning and a reassurance all at once. The negotiations continued. A break was called, symbolic mostly, as no one moved. Nutrient fields adjusted, allowing species to absorb sustenance without leaving their seats. Leo felt a faint warmth pass through him, the station's best approximation of lunch. It tasted like disappointment and citrus. During a particularly long procedural dispute, Sylvana leaned a fraction closer. "If you must panic," she said, "do it internally. The chamber amplifies emotional spikes." "I'll panic very quietly," Leo whispered back. "I've had practice." She almost smiled. Almost. Hours passed. Leo learned the rhythm of her reactions, the subtle cues that signaled when a comment struck too close to grief, when a rival was testing the silence of the empty throne beside them. He began to understand why his presence mattered. 2 seats occupied suggested continuity, strength, the illusion that loss had not hollowed the queen's authority. At one point, a delegate gestured pointedly at the empty throne. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Leo felt Sylvana's hand tremble just once. Without thinking, he shifted his fingers, adjusting his grip, grounding rather than restraining. It was a small motion, probably invisible to everyone else. The queen exhaled slowly. She did not release his hand. As the cycle lights dimmed slightly, signaling the negotiations were nearing their end, Leo realized something unsettling. He was no longer counting the minutes. The tension remained, sharp and dangerous, but beneath it was something steadier. Purpose, perhaps, or connection, forged in shared stillness. When another speaker rose to challenge the Queen directly, Leo felt her grip tighten again. He braced himself, shoulders squared, ready to sit through whatever came next. If history demanded a witness, he would remain exactly where he was. After all, standing up now would be far more terrifying. By the time Leo's arm returned from complete numbness to a dull, throbbing approximation of life, he had begun to suspect the council chamber existed outside conventional time. The lights overhead shifted through imperceptible cycles meant to soothe circadian rhythms across dozens of species, but all they really did was remind him that hours were passing and he was still holding the Queen's hand like an accidental heir. The chamber's central projection dissolved and reformed, now displaying a lattice of trade corridors threading through disputed space. Each line pulsed in a different color, some bright with promise, others flickering ominously. Leo watched them with forced interest. Watching holograms was safe. Holograms did not ask him to speak. A delegate from a methane-breathing consortium began outlining economic concessions. The translator rendered their words in a calm, almost cheerful tone that did not quite mask the underlying hostility. Leo felt Sylvana's fingers tighten again. This time, however, there was something else beneath the tension. Anticipation. "You're about to hear a lie," she murmured, so softly he wondered if he imagined it. "Oh," he whispered back. "Is it a complicated one, or the insulting kind?" "The insulting kind," she said. "They prefer efficiency." The lie arrived right on schedule, wrapped in concern and mutual benefit. Leo did not understand the specifics, but he recognized the cadence of manipulation. He had heard it in budget meetings and performance reviews, scaled here to interstellar proportions. He squeezed Sylvana's hand once before he could stop himself, a reflexive human response to nonsense. Her thumb brushed his knuckles. Approval. She spoke then, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. It was calm, measured, devastating. She dismantled the argument piece by piece, referencing historical precedents, economic models, and one obscure treaty clause Leo was fairly certain no one else remembered. The hologram adjusted in real time, trade lines shifting color as her words landed. The methane breather fell silent. Leo stared straight ahead, resisting the urge to grin. He had never before been this close to someone winning a war with grammar. As the discussion moved on, he became aware of something strange. The delegates were watching him, not openly, but with the sideways glances reserved for unexpected variables. He adjusted his posture, suddenly self-conscious. He wondered if he should look more dignified or less alive. "You can relax," Sylvana said, sensing his discomfort. "They are trying to decide if you are important." "I'm not," he whispered earnestly. "I'm very, very replaceable." She considered this. "That may be true," she said, "but at the moment, you are useful." Leo wasn't sure whether to be offended or honored. He settled for quietly proud. Another break was called. The station's ambient system shifted again, simulating a gentle dawn for species that required visual cues. Leo felt his stomach protest. He had long since exhausted the nutrient field's offerings, and his body was beginning to file formal complaints. "If I pass out," he murmured, "please tell them it was a strategic feint." Sylvana's shoulders shook once, almost imperceptibly. It took Leo a moment to realize she was laughing. The negotiations took a darker turn. A rival faction referenced the late consort directly, their words sharpened with calculated cruelty. The empty throne seemed to loom larger, its silence oppressive. Leo felt Sylvana's grip tighten painfully this time, her control straining. Without thinking, he leaned a fraction closer, not enough to draw attention, just enough to be unmistakably present. He adjusted his grip again, grounding, steady. His heart hammered, but he stayed still. Sylvana did not look at him. She did not need to. Her response was brief and devastating, a reminder that grief did not equate to weakness. The chamber fell silent. Even the hum beneath the floor seemed to dim. As the session dragged on, Leo realized something else had changed. The tension remained, sharp as ever, but threaded through it was an odd familiarity. shared glances, quiet exchanges, a rhythm built on endurance and mutual restraint. When the cycle lights finally shifted toward closure, Leo felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. He had grown accustomed to this strange, impossible role. Anchor, witness, human-shaped symbol of continuity. The Queen's hand was still wrapped around his, and for reasons he could not yet articulate, he hoped it would remain there a little longer. The chamber grew quieter as the negotiations entered their most delicate phase, the point where words weighed more than fleets. Leo noticed the change not through sound, but through pressure. The air itself seemed to thicken, as if the station were holding its breath along with everyone else. His arm miraculously had settled into a tolerable state of existence, no longer numb, no longer screaming, merely resigned. A delegate with reflective skin rose slowly, their surface rippling with projected data. They spoke of balance, of mutual restraint, of the dangers of emotional leadership. Leo recognized the tactic immediately. This was not an argument meant to convince. It was one meant to provoke. He felt Sylvana's fingers tense, not sharply this time, but with a weary familiarity, like someone bracing for a bruise they had learned to expect. "You may hear something unpleasant," she murmured. "I've worked in administration," Leo whispered back. "I'm immune." That earned him another almost smile. It was becoming a pattern, these nearly visible reactions, small cracks in the perfect surface of her composure that only he seemed close enough to notice. The thought was both thrilling and alarming. The reflective delegate continued, carefully circling the absence beside her. They never named the consort, never gestured openly at the empty throne, but every sentence bent toward it, implying fragility, suggesting that loss had made the Queen predictable. Leo felt anger spark, surprising him with its intensity. He had no personal stake in interstellar politics, but he suddenly found himself deeply offended on Sylvana's behalf. She responded with silence. The chamber waited. Silence here was never empty. It stretched, deliberate, forcing the speaker to confront it. Leo realized she was doing something risky. Silence could be read as hesitation or as absolute confidence. The line between the two was thin and deadly. He shifted slightly, just enough for his shoulder to brush the side of the throne. The contact sent a faint vibration through the alloy, a resonant hum that echoed softly. Several delegates stiffened. Leo froze, heart racing, convinced he had just committed a ceremonial violation, punishable by exile or spontaneous disintegration. Sylvana's grip tightened, then relaxed. "Well done," she said quietly. "Well done?" he whispered, incredulous. "You reminded them the throne still exists," she replied. "Empty does not mean irrelevant." The silence broke. Sylvana spoke then, her voice calm, precise, and edged with something sharper than anger. She acknowledged loss without dwelling on it, reframed grief as continuity rather than rupture, and reminded the council that her authority did not derive from partnership, but from mandate. As she spoke, the holographic projections adjusted, data aligning in her favor. Even the reflective delegate's surface dimmed slightly, their projections faltering. Leo listened, transfixed. He had thought power was loud, dramatic, unmistakable. Watching her, he understood that real power was often quiet, patient, and deeply exhausting. As the arguments waned, a procedural pause was announced. This time several delegates actually shifted, stretching limbs, adjusting fields. Leo resisted the urge to slump. He maintained his posture with what he hoped was dignified endurance. "You're remarkably still," Sylvana observed. "I'm afraid if I move, I won't stop," he admitted. "I'll just roll out of the chamber and into space." "That would complicate the minutes," she said. "Please refrain." He snorted softly before he could stop himself. The sound echoed more than expected. A nearby delegate turned, their eye stalks swiveling in mild alarm. Leo straightened, face carefully neutral. Sylvana's thumb traced a small, reassuring circle against his hand. The final objections were raised and dismantled. The treaty text stabilized, its clauses locking into place with soft, harmonic tones. The station systems registered the shift, lights brightening subtly, the background hum smoothing into something almost musical. Leo felt the change ripple through the chamber, tension easing fraction by fraction. He also felt something else, quieter but no less significant, a sense of shared survival. They had endured this together, through hours of pressure and unspoken grief, through threats and almost smiles. As the council prepared to adjourn, Leo realized he was no longer simply reacting. He was present, engaged, part of the moment rather than a terrified accessory to it. The Queen's hand remained in his, steady and warm now, no longer cold. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was very glad he had not stood up. The council did not adjourn so much as hesitate on the edge of ending, as if reluctant to acknowledge that something fragile had actually held. Leo felt it in the way the chamber lights hovered between states, not yet shifting fully to closure, the station's systems waiting for confirmation that no one would suddenly overturn the table and declare war out of spite. His hand was still in Sylvana's, and he had reached the strange point where this no longer felt remarkable. It simply felt correct, like gravity continuing to function. A final delegate rose, one whose presence Leo had learned to dread. They belonged to a faction that specialized in patience, in saving their sharpest blades for the very last moment. Their voice, once translated, was almost kind. They congratulated the council on its progress, praised the Queen's composure, and then, with surgical precision, referenced her consort by name. The chamber reacted instantly, a subtle tightening of fields, a collective inhale. Leo felt Sylvana's hand clamp around his with sudden force, pain flaring bright and sharp. Her breathing changed just barely, but enough that he noticed. The empty throne seemed to loom again, its silence heavy with memory. For the first time since this ordeal began, Leo's mind went utterly blank. There was no protocol, no internal monologue, no frantic search for the correct response. There was only the sensation of her grip and the knowledge that this moment mattered more than all the others combined. So he leaned closer. It was not a grand gesture. He did not speak, did not look at the delegate, did not even fully turn toward Sylvana. He simply shifted, reducing the space between them until their shoulders nearly touched. His hand adjusted around hers, no longer passive, no longer just held, but holding back. The pain eased, replaced by a steadier pressure. The delegate paused just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Sylvana lifted her head. When she spoke, her voice carried something new. Not anger, not grief, certainty. She acknowledged the loss directly, named it without flinching, and then dismantled the implication that followed. She spoke of continuity, of governance designed to endure beyond individuals, of strength that did not vanish with love. The holographic text of the treaty responded, clauses locking, symbols stabilizing, the system recognizing finality. The delegate sat. The chamber released its breath. The lights shifted fully now, a soft tonal change signaling agreement reached. The treaty finalized itself with a resonant chord that Leo felt more than heard, vibrating faintly through the throne, through the floor, through his bones. He realized his heart was racing. He also realized he was smiling, a wide, ridiculous grin he quickly tried to suppress. Sylvana did not let go of his hand. Instead, she leaned toward him, just enough that only he could hear her. That was illogical, she said. I'm very good at that, Leo whispered back. It's my primary skill. A flicker of amusement crossed her face, unmistakable this time. The almost smiles had finally become real. As the council members began to rise, gathering data slates and retracting atmospheric fields, Leo felt a sudden wave of exhaustion crash over him. Adrenaline drained away, leaving behind the awareness that he had been sitting perfectly still for hours while the fate of multiple civilizations balanced precariously nearby. His legs protested, his spine filed grievances. Are you going to stand? Sylvana asked quietly. He glanced at the throne, then at her hand still wrapped around his. I was waiting for permission, he said, only half joking. She considered this for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Then gently she loosened her grip. The absence was immediate and startling, like a sound cutting out mid-note. Leo's hand felt cold where hers had been. You may, she said. He stood carefully, legs wobbling in a way he hoped looked dignified rather than tragic. He resisted the urge to bow, salute, or flee. Around them, Delegates were departing, some casting curious glances, others deliberately looking away, already rewriting the narrative in their heads. As the chamber emptied, Leo became acutely aware of the silence. Not the heavy, threatening silence from before, but something calmer, reflective. The stars beyond the transparent walls drifted on, unchanged, as if unimpressed by the day's accomplishments. He looked at Silvana then, truly looked at her, no longer from the corner of his eye. Up close, without the weight of performance pressing down, she looked tired, relieved, still very much a queen, but also unmistakably alone. "Thank you," she said. The words landed harder than any threat had. Leo swallowed, unsure how to respond, and finally settled on honesty. "Any time," he said, "preferably under less historic circumstances." She laughed softly, openly, the sound startling in the empty chamber. For the first time since he had sat down in the wrong seat, Leo felt certain of something else as well. This was not the end of what had begun. The council chamber felt impossibly large once it was empty. Without the layered voices, the shifting fields, the quiet menace of watched stillness, it became a cathedral of light and glass. The holographic systems powered down one by one, leaving only the distant glow of stars drifting past the transparent walls. Leo stood near the throne, hands clasped behind his back, suddenly unsure where to put himself now that the universe no longer required him to remain perfectly still. Queen Silvana remained seated for a moment longer, her posture still regal out of habit rather than necessity. When she finally rose, the movement was slower, unguarded. She seemed lighter without the weight of observation, though the fatigue beneath it all was now impossible to miss. "You may sit," she said, gesturing toward the throne beside hers. Leo blinked. "I think I've reached my lifetime quota for that seat." "A pity," she replied. "You wore it well." He laughed, the sound echoing oddly in the empty space. It surprised him how natural it felt. Hours ago, he had been a bundle of nerves wrapped in formal fabric. Now standing here, he felt steadier. Changed, though he wasn't yet sure how. They walked together toward the chamber's edge, where the glass curved outward into the void. A ceremonial cruiser drifted past, its hull reflecting starlight like a slow-moving comet. For a while, neither of them spoke. "At some point," Leo said finally, "someone is going to ask me to explain what happened today." "Yes," Silvana agreed. "They will ask me as well. I'm considering pretending I was never here." She tilted her head, studying him with mild amusement. "You would be a very poor historical omission." He smiled, then grew thoughtful. "I didn't plan any of this. I just sat down and stayed," she said gently. Many would not have. The words settled between them, warm and heavy. Leo realized that she was right. He had stayed, not because of protocol or fear or even ambition, but because at some point leaving had felt wrong. He had chosen presence over safety, connection over invisibility. That realization startled him more than anything else that had happened. A soft chime echoed through the chamber as station systems confirmed the treaty's successful transmission across secure channels. The agreement was official now, beyond undoing. Peace, at least the negotiated kind, would hold. Silvana exhaled slowly. "It is done." "It is," Leo said. "You did it." "We did," she corrected. He met her gaze then, really met it, and saw no trace of the distant monarch the council had faced. What he saw instead was someone who had carried grief with precision, who had ruled through silence and restraint, who had allowed herself, if only briefly, to rely on an accidental human assistant. "I don't think I'm the same person I was when I walked in here," he admitted. "Nor should you be," she said. "Change is the cost of proximity." That sounded like wisdom, or possibly a warning. Leo accepted it anyway. A discreet panel slid open near the chamber entrance. An aide appeared, bowed deeply, and froze when they noticed Leo standing beside the queen. The moment stretched, awkward and familiar. "This is Leo Marsh," Silvana said calmly. "He will be accompanying me for the remainder of the station visit." The aide nodded rapidly, already revising internal assumptions about reality. Leo cleared his throat. "I should probably inform my supervisor," he said. "They're going to think I was abducted." Silvana's lips curved. You were, she said lightly, politely. As they moved toward the exit, Leo cast one last glance at the empty throne. It no longer radiated absence. It simply existed, a reminder of loss acknowledged rather than hidden. He understood now what she had meant earlier. Empty did not mean irrelevant. The corridor beyond was bright, alive with motion and sound, the station resuming its endless rhythm. Leo walked beside the queen, no longer holding her hand, yet feeling the echo of that connection with every step. He had come to Concordance to be invisible. He was leaving having been seen, and somehow, improbably, that felt like the beginning rather than the end.